And Nicole's got to send a very important book club text.
Would you believe it is a book club text?
Wow, we're rolling. Leave it in. Folks, we're back.
Is this to a different book club?
It's to a different book club. Rollie can verify.
You're literally cheating on our book club with a different book club. That's fucked up.
It's about finding a new location for my in-person book club.
Well, now that we're sufficiently spurned, why don't we pop this thing off? Folks, thanks so much for coming to a very special episode of the Climate Deniers Playbook.
Da, da, da.
And there's a baby
special,
on. Oh, no.
Very special episode.
Is that what that was?
I don't know. I was trying to do like a musical sting. Da, da, da.
Oh, okay.
It's a very special episode. I guess that's Clone High, right?
You do a very special, and then I'll do a musical sting.
Okay. Okay. It's a very special episode of the Climate Deniers Playbook.
Mama. Hey, future Rollie here, just chiming in to let you know that we somehow lost audio in one of the microphones for the first half of this episode. The good news is we used 3 different microphones, so it's just going to sound like a little bit worse than usual for the first half. And if that's a deal breaker, totally get it. We're sorry. Either skip to the second half or just hit the old dusty trail, and we'll see you next time. Okay, back to the show. All right, hot dogs. Look, in this podcast, we so often are just cracking wise about hacky dipshits who have a lot of interesting and dumb things to say about the climate crisis.
And that's just Rollie.
Okay. Be serious. Okay. This all stays in. Okay. No. Yeah. We're constantly pulling up clips of Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, and they're like, "Are the climate elites through charging you double for your vegetables?" And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? So we thought today we would do what we call a book club episode, where we look at some actually well-written and well-crafted pieces of climate media, just to like kind of show the dipshits what to shoot for, but also to like, kind of cleanse the palate. And right now is a pretty good time to be like reading up on this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's our plan.
And if you hate reading, this is sort of like the SparkNotes version, and then you never have to read again.
Yeah, this is all you have to do, and then
is subscribe to our Patreon so that you can unlock the full episode.
That's right.
And then you'll never have to read again.
That's right. These 4 books are all you'll need. So why don't we pop this thing off? I'm going to start with what is almost the seminal tome for environmentalism, which, of course, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson.
This is a classic book I've been meaning to read for over a decade, and I swear to God I will do it someday.
Let me just be upfront right now. This is literary clemency here. If you haven't read these books, it's okay.
Totally.
You don't have to feel like a bad person for not having read these books. Anyone out there, it's totally fine. Here's kind of a primer, and I hope we kind of wet your whistle enough to want to hunt this book down and give it a read.
Yeah.
Okay.
Develop an appetite for Silent Spring.
That's right. Silent Spring, of course, published in 1962 by Rachel Carson. And then an interesting thing happened in 1972 that we'll talk about. I got some notes here. Okay, so
Rollie, I'm going to warn you right now. When we walked in and I saw that you had 2 pages of notes, I was like, oh no, Rollie did much more work for this podcast than I did.
I think having read the book is the work you need to do for the podcast.
Okay. Well, if Rollie's sections are a little better, sorry.
And if Nicole's sections are better, I have no excuse. Okay, so Silent Spring is mostly about the explosion of the chemical industry and more chemical usage in the United States on plants and the environment, usually to kill pests. It talks about a lot of different chemicals, but it focuses in particularly on a chemical called DDT. Familiar?
DDT,
yeah. DDT for short. So basically, the chemical industry got really rich and powerful after World War II, after they, kind of used wartime to develop a bunch of murder chemicals. And this is kind of the story of what happens when there's an incredibly wealthy industry that is very willing to continue producing chemicals at wartime levels after wartime.
And this is the only industry that's ever done that, right?
I did look it up, and yes, that's true.
Okay.
Yes, it's the only one. So I wrote this down because I think I want to nail this. The entire book is a waltz through a menagerie of devastating stories about various companies and government agencies using untested chemicals on wildlife to fix pretty minor problems and then having horrifically unintended consequences from that chemical.
Did you write Waltz Through a Menagerie yourself?
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
That sounds like a
Don't say ChatGPT.
No.
I will kill myself.
That sounds like a blurb on the back of the book.
Oh, yeah.
On the next edition of the book, they should blurb you.
A
waltz through a menagerie.
I actually think that the use of the word waltz is a little bit thin here, right?
Okay.
They're not.
Well, I haven't read the book, so I can neither confirm nor deny that this is a waltz.
So if the waltz is the well-written part, then yes, it is a waltz because Rachel Carson's a great writer. But if the waltz is it easy to get through the book? Good God, no. And this book is 290-something pages, and it's 280 pages of examples proving what Rachel Carson is talking about.
Uh-huh.
And she mostly skips over some of the more horrific examples, for which I was like, oh, thank God. And then there's a chapter that's like, let me tell you exactly how these robins died a horrific death to use chemical. And it just drags you through the reality of what happens when you indiscriminately spray pesticides all over everything. Yeah. So literally this book is just a lot of different examples. And I think I'm going to kick this off by having you read a couple paragraphs from page 162. And then the fallout on page 166.
During most of the 40-odd years since its arrival in the United States, the fire ant seems to have attracted little attention, unless you're a fourth grader with a magnifying glass, am I right?
Dude, why didn't Rachel Carson write that part in, dude?
During most of its 40-odd years since its arrival in the United States, the fire ant seems to have attracted little attention. The states where it was most abundant considered it a nuisance, chiefly because it builds large nests or mounds a foot or more high. These may hamper the operation of farm machinery. But only 2 states listed it among their 20 most important insect pests, and these placed it near the bottom of the list.
Okay, just to hammer in, there's 50 states. 2 states mentioned it.
Yes.
At the bottom.
Yes.
So, the fire ant is not really a pest in America. But continue.
No official or private concern seems to have been felt about the fire ant as a menace to crops or livestock. With the development of chemicals of broad lethal powers, there came a sudden change in the official attitude towards the fire ant. In 1957, the United States Department of Agriculture launched one of the most remarkable publicity campaigns in its history. The fire ant suddenly became the target of a barrage of government releases, motion pictures, and government-inspired stories portraying it as a despoiler of southern agriculture and a killer of birds, livestock, and man.
Oh, God.
A mighty campaign was announced in which the federal government, in cooperation with the afflicted states, would ultimately treat some 20 million acres in 9 southern states. Quote, United States pesticide makers appear to have tapped a sales bonanza in the increasing numbers of broad-scale pest elimination programs conducted by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, end quote, cheerfully reported one trade journal in 1958 as the fire ant program got underway.
This is kind of classic Silent Spring, where it's like, hey, somebody has identified a pest that's maybe it's annoying for some people, but obviously not a huge problem. And the chemical industry has sort of swept in and said, hey, we'll take care of that. We can spray the shit out of your land.
Yeah, we'll spray the shit out of your land with chemicals of broad lethal powers.
Yeah. Hey, what do you want? Chemicals of broad benign powers? And then just go to 166 for kind of the fallout of what happened when they sprayed for the fire ant.
Okay, well, immediately this is sad. Dead birds found in the treated areas had absorbed or swallowed the poisons used against the fire ants, a fact clearly shown by chemical analysis of their tissues. The only bird surviving in any numbers was the house sparrow, which in other areas too has given some evidence that it may be relatively immune. On a tract in Alabama treated in 1959, half of the birds were killed. Species that live on the ground or frequent low vegetation suffered 100% mortality. Even a year after treatment, a spring die-off of songbirds occurred and much good nesting territory lay silent and unoccupied. In Texas, dead blackbirds, dick sissels.
It doesn't say that, Nicole.
Is that a bird?
You're just saying that. That's not in the book.
I got into sort of got into birding this year, and this is the first time ever hearing of dick sissels.
I think you might go on to read that there was a 100% mortality rate of the dick scissor.
Well, I guess maybe that's why I didn't hear about
it. It's actually kind of a positive.
In Texas, dead blackbirds, dick thistles, and meadowlarks were found at the nests, and many nests were deserted. When specimens of dead birds from Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida were sent to the Fish and Wildlife Service for analysis, more than 90% were found to contain residues of dieldrin, or a form of heptachlor, in amounts up to 38 parts per million. And that's a lot of heptachlor per million.
Yeah, even 1 million heptachlor, that's too much for me.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I'm making jokes here to deal with the emotional fact that is devastating.
And it's that every single fucking page. It's like it's an important book to read because my God, it is crazy how indiscriminately we were spraying chemicals in the 60s and then just didn't really stop.
Yeah.
In 1972, largely because of this book, Silent Spring, they did ban DDT, which is like kind of the focal chemical in this book. But there are thousands of chemicals. There's practically more every single day. And Rachel Carson talked about a bevy of chemicals, and only DDT really got the kind of spotlight in this one.
Wow.
She probably could have written 100 of these books.
I'm glad she didn't.
Yeah, me too. So just to kind of give you the litany of the various problems that Rachel Carson highlights in this book, amongst others, spraying indiscriminately, spraying way too much of a chemical, doing too widespread of a spray. They sprayed from planes, and up to 80% of the chemicals missed their intended target. Thousands of new chemicals were getting made, and there's no way to test for them in the water supply or in animal supplies.
Oh.
Because these are just new and novel chemicals. And the only way chemists can detect if something's in there is if they have an indicator or a chemical test to figure out how many are in there.
And some guy was like, hey, I just came up with a new chemical. And sprayed it everywhere, and they couldn't.
I mean, there was some semblance of a safety test, but you've got to do very wide testing over many weeks and months and years, and they simply didn't have time and didn't really need to legally.
Yeah.
So they could just use chemicals. Another thing that happened was chemicals would mix in nature. You'd create chemicals that no chemist would make in a lab because they would be too dangerous, but you'd be dumping chemicals and then they would naturally mix in nature and create these horrific other chemicals. Companies were using different chemicals who were based out of various different states or would go bankrupt and not be accountable to the spraying that they did.
To put this in my non-chemistry brain terms that I understand, it would basically be one chemical company being hey, you want to take care of your problems, spray our bleach on it. And then another chemical company being hey, you want to take care of your problems, spray some of our ammonia on it. And then people were okay, and spraying everything, and it was functionally mixing together to form not mustard gas, but a more complex chemical.
I think that's an excellent way to think about it.
Thank you. Okay.
And these chemicals also seep into groundwater. And so you get a bunch of different pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and fertilizers mixed, seeping into local groundwater and then mixing together and forming these crazy compounds that poison the shit out of cows and things. Another problem is that chemicals will concentrate in animals up a food chain. If you spray fire ants, they'll have a certain concentration of heptachlor, but if a bird eats those, that will concentrate the heptachlor to 10 or 100x that's in a fire ant.
It does sound like you're describing a Dungeons and Dragons board game.
Sure. That's true.
I concentrate my heptachlor 10 times.
You have to roll a 15 to kill the heptachlor. And one of the big kind of takeaways was that when you try to target a pest, a small little insect, it's really, really hard to kill off tiny little insects because there's just so many of them. They replicate so quickly. But it's not that hard to kill off birds because there's not that many of them and they don't replicate as fast. So what ends up happening over and over in this book is that people are oh, I don't like this little bug. I'll spray for the bug. They spray for the bug, get 90% of the bugs, and then get 90% of the birds too. And then the 10% of the bugs will just explode in population again.
And now there's no birds to eat them.
Yeah, hence Silent Spring.
Because they're not chirping. Wow.
They're not chirping.
Apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Devastating.
I mean, really great in the morning when you're trying to sleep, but every other part of the day that you've murdered all the birds. Honestly, that's actually a pretty good metaphor. It's oh, hey, I need to sleep more in the morning. Why don't we just genocide all the birds? and then there will be no repercussions.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this book is like thought of kind of as the birth of the American environmental movement. And this is before climate change was really on the radar. It was much more about like polluting our water, polluting our lands, killing our birds.
Yeah. I mean, truly, I kept on reading this book, and it's so modern feeling that, like, there are these massive companies that are cranking out these chemicals that are polluting, and they're not facing any justice. And I was like, why is she so fucking obsessed with the 1950s? Like, I feel like every story is from the 1950s. Like, hello, it's 70 years later. And it's like, no, she wrote this in 1962. Yeah. Or, like, in the late 50s and 60s. And it was very depressing to just be like, oh, right, we didn't really fix it.
Yeah. I mean, we got rid of DDT.
We did get rid of DDT. And just so we don't neglect it, this book is largely about DDT, and we did ban DDT in 72, which is a very...
72? This book came out in 62?
Yeah.
And then it took 10 years for us to be like, all the birds are dead, we should ban this?
That is a sleeper hit.
Okay.
Yeah, the court systems in America have not seemed to have improved too much.
When Blackfish came out, SeaWorld had to get rid of their orcas in like a year.
If only there was Instagram when Rita Carson made Sullivan Spring. No one would have read it. Because we would have been too busy looking at Instagram. Yeah. So DDT, they thought like, oh, this is pretty safe. We're spraying it everywhere. I've got a little clip here actually that I'm going to play in a second. But DDT apparently caused things like tremors, seizures, paralysis, nerve system damage, both behavioral and cognitive damage. And this is mostly in animals, but some symptoms in humans. Reduction in fertility or complete infertility, birth defects and developmental defects, thinning of the eggshells for birds, which causes eggs to not be viable. They break easily. The little chick inside doesn't survive. Breast cancer and weakened sperm count, and immune system weakening and general cancer.
So that sounds bad, I would say.
That was bad, yeah. Most of all of them, I think they're bad.
Okay.
And I could read you a big list of problems with DDT, but why would I do it when dudes with transatlantic accents could do it for you? I've compiled a series of clips from a documentary television special that was produced about the Silent Spring popularity.
Seeing the stills of whatever I'm looking at do make this look like an old-timey monster movie that I'm about to watch.
For sure. And in a very real way, it is. And the monster is people. All right, here we go. Ready?
I think there is no doubt that the use of pesticides has resulted in extensive damage to wildlife. Wherever we have conducted careful studies, we have had losses that averaged 80% or more. During the past years, do you think that
I gotta say, this very serious scientist giving us a warning looks like Max Headroom. Like,
oh, yeah.
He looks like he's got two-tone hair.
Some incredible hairstyles.
He looks like he's like hungry for power other captain in Star Trek. He's amazing. Keep going.
During the past years, do you think that the public was sufficiently appraised of the potential hazards of pesticides?
The answer I could say very quickly is no.
The FDA also discovered, through improved means of measurement, that residues of some pesticides permitted on food crops for many years were, in fact, too toxic for human consumption.
We have found a reduction in the number of eggs laid, a reduction of the fertility of the eggs that are laid, a reduction in the number that hatch from these which were fertile, a reduction in the number of viable chicks that are produced from the eggs that do hatch.
We've learned that pesticides can be flushed off the land in sufficient quantities to destroy aquatic life. This is usually made obvious by floating dead fish.
That is the droopy doggest man in the world. Well, we didn't want to spray, and then all the fish died.
This is usually made obvious by floating dead fish.
As much as 80% of a pesticide sprayed from a plane may miss the target. A public health service toxicologist stated there is no evidence that the small doses of pesticides we get are causing harm. But is there no evidence as a result of investigation? Or is there no evidence because no investigation has been made? The total number of pesticides studied by the Public Health Service for cumulative effects on humans, 3.
Wow, that is that a famous news reporter that I should know?
I don't I don't know.
His voice sounds very iconic to me, but it might just be that era of voice sounds like that.
It is funny that like everybody's trying to do some guy that they, everyone's trying to do somebody's voice, but there's no one who naturally goes, "My God, I stubbed my toe on the coffee table and boy, it smarts." Like, that's a made-up transatlantic accent,
Yeah.
I guess, so that you could enunciate on the shitty-ass microphone.
I mean, look, it's working because he speaks with authority and an absolute just hammer drop of just devastating analysis.
Yeah. Those are excerpts from a program called The Silent Spring of Rachel Carson.
Okay.
When watching this, one of the funniest parts was that the chemical industry PR guy, the like scientist that they kind of trot out to be like, "No, it's cool." He's like the evilest sounding dude. "Well, yes, there were a number of deaths of animals and certainly the concentration was high, but I think it's pretty fine." It's really funny.
Wait, Rollie, you can't do this impression and not let me hear what this guy sounds like. Can you find is the guy in here?
It's that guy.
Okay, so as cool as that other like David Lynchian scientist looked, is as uncool as this guy looks. Pencil thin mustache, thick glasses. Not that there's anything wrong with thick glasses, but let's hear this guy's voice.
Are gross distortions of the actual facts, completely unsupported by scientific experimental evidence and general practical experience in the field.
And furthermore, rock and roll music is corrupting our nation's youth.
Yeah, I really think that if they just cut in the droopy dog guy who's like, "Yes, all the dead fish in the stream were pretty sad." So that was Silent Spring. I really think you guys should give it a read. It's a tough read, not because it's poorly written, but because it's just so devastating. And we're going to end on a quote from page 85 from the chapter Needless Havoc.
Oh, this is nice. On this page, there's a very sweet drawing of lots of little adorable animals who I'm sure were totally fine.
Yeah, I'm sure those animals actually are fine because they're not real.
As man proceeds toward his announced goal of the conquest of nature, he has written a depressing record of destruction, directed not only against the earth he inhabits, but against the life that shares it with him. The history of the recent centuries has its black passages: the slaughter of the buffalo on the western plains, the massacre of the shorebirds by the market gunners, the near extermination of the egrets for their plumage. Now, to these and others like them, we are adding a new chapter and a new kind of havoc: the direct killing of birds, mammals, fishes, and indeed practically every form of wildlife by chemical insecticides indiscriminately sprayed on the land. Bummer!
Yeah, kind of a bummer. However, the not bummer from this book, so here's what happened. This book had to bum us out so far down into the water that we gained momentum and shot out like a cork. And I'm going to read you a quote. "Silent Spring played in the history of environmentalism roughly the same role that Uncle Tom's Cabin played in the abolitionist movement. In fact, EPA today may be said without exaggeration to be the extended shadow of Rachel Carson. The influence of her book has brought together over 14,000 scientists, lawyers, managers, and other employees across the country to fight the good fight for environmental protection." Where do you think that quote is from?
Wikipedia.
EPA.gov.
Whoa!
Yeah, it is on the actual EPA's website.
For as long as it's
still there. And although, hang on. There is a header at the top of this that says, "EPA's web archive, this content is not maintained and may no longer apply." Wow, that's a bummer. But it is nice. It really can't be overstated the impact that Silent Spring had on environmentalism. It was like a huge factor in just the creation of the EPA. It was a huge factor in galvanizing people to realize that the natural environment was not just like a thing that was infinite and will always be there, and we can just like pillage as much as we want and it'll always come back. It's like, no, you can murder the shit out of animals enough to kill them completely. And part of what Rachel Carson did was turn people on to the fact that like, oh no, we actually need to be good stewards of the environment. And that's why I chose Silent Spring as my first book.
Yay!
All right, Nicole, what do you got?
Well, Rollie, I have one of my favorite books of all time.
Oh, Hop on Pop, Volume 3? You fucking dilettante.
No, Rollie. This is a book called Cadillac Desert.
Ooh, cool title.
One of the all-time best, Cadillac Desert, the American West and its Disappearing Water.
Okay.
This is a book by Mark Reiser. This is a book my friend Ryan recommended to me many years ago, and since then he's been lording it over me that he recommended one of the best books I've ever read.
I was going to say we should shout out Ryan, but he sounds like a real dick.
Ryan is smarter than me and knows it, and therefore I resent him. Cadillac Desert is incredible. It's much like The High Cost of Free Parking. It's one of those books that when you describe it, you have to be like, but I swear it's interesting. Cadillac Desert tracks the growth of water infrastructure in the western United States. It is focused largely on the building of dams and how we have completely fucked up rivers and watersheds and misallocated water.
I say funked them up. He funked them up real good.
He funked them up real good.
Entire towns got funked up.
Yeah, some say they're still funky to this day. And it covers a huge portion of American history that influenced the way the entire Western United States was developed. I think one of the reasons that it resonated with me is because you and I grew up in Colorado in a region which is profoundly affected by all of these issues. I have been on a lot of road trips with my family through the American West. I've seen a lot of the sites in here. And in fact, there's a building right next to the neighborhood that you and I grew up in that I have driven past on the way to school, my entire life. And the building is named after a guy in this book.
Oh, yeah. That's part of the Federal Center, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you
Yes.
You know this? You got me this job, actually.
Oh,
because you knew Scott, and Scott
Yes.
got me this job at the Bureau of Reclamation.
Oh, I didn't know it was with the Bureau of Reclamation.
Yeah.
When you were analyzing the zebra mussels.
Oh, yeah.
Which are still a big problem.
Yeah.
So you didn't fix it at all.
I fixed it, and then they fucked it up again. They funked it up.
Okay. Anyway, this book is all about water, and it is largely about building dams.
Now, little spoiler alert here. I have read the first, I want to say, 3/4 of this book.
And it's great.
It's the first 3/4 are great, and then there's the last quarter that it was hard for me to get through, and I hung it up. I thought, you know what, I'll take from it what I need. And I'll give
you got
the
through the
away.
most important part. The other thing that I'll add is that this book was published in 86, and the most recent edition came out, I think in 92 or 93, early 90s. So a lot of updates have happened since this book, but the history that it covers is very good. That Mark Reisner, who is the author, wrote this book in the early 80s, published in 1986, and then he released another edition in the early 90s, and then he died not too long after that. And then I think there was another edition, but it didn't make substantial changes. So since this book is a little bit older, there have been updates to water issues in the Western United States, although a lot of the problems are still in place for reasons that he details in the book.
It is funny. If you write a good enough book like Silent Spring or Cadillac Desert, the problems are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, what a bummer. So anyway, there might be some quotes in here that you're like, that doesn't sound quite right anymore, but that might just be because it was 1992, the last time they updated it. So the first quote that I'm going to have you read, let me see, I should have marked it in the book, but I borrowed your copy of the book, so I don't want to mark it up.
Just for the record, Nicole, anytime you borrow my copy of a book, feel free to mark it up.
Okay, great.
The more destroyed a book is, the better I think you're using the book. But don't burn it.
Okay, so I said I was going to have one preface, but now that I'm looking for these passages, I do have a second preface, and I'm sorry.
I believe you, Nicole.
I'm sorry, second preface is that with Cadillac Desert in particular, but also the other book I'm going to talk about, I forgot, when I was looking for passages, I was like, for this to really hit home, I would need Rollie to read 7 pages of context. That's the thing about books, is that they really build on a storyline to come to a conclusion, and it's, I don't know, the context helps. So,
sure. It's important that the whole book is written for the summary,
yes.
For sure. I do remember you were mentioning this yesterday on a phone call where you were like, I think I need you to read multiple pages, and I was like, what is this, a podcast or an audio book?
You were right. You were right to say it. Okay, so this is about as they are trying to dam up rivers and irrigate the Western United States. There were a lot of private companies who tried to do this, and then the private companies all failed, and then some people had water and some people didn't, and it was just sort of a disaster. And so this is about how the United States federal government got involved with water infrastructure in the Western United States. I'm going to have you start at this part where it says it's faith in private enterprise, and when it says its faith, it means the faith of the American West.
Its faith in private enterprise was nearly as absolute as its earlier faith that settlement would make the climate wetter. John Wesley Powell, a Midwesterner, knew that all the private initiative in the world would never make it bloom. Theodore Roosevelt, an Easterner, had returned from the West convinced that there were vast areas of public land which can be made available for settlement. But only, he added, by building reservoirs and mainline canals impractical for private enterprise. But the West wasn't listening. For the first time in their history, Americans had come up against a problem they could not begin to master with traditional American solutions. Private capital, individual initiative, hard work, and yet the region confronting the problem happened to believe most fervently in such solutions. Through the 1890s, Western senators and congressmen resisted all suggestions that reclamation was a task for government alone, not even for the states, which had failed as badly as the private companies, but for the national government. To believe such a thing was to imply that their constituents did not measure up to the myth that enshrouded them, that of the indomitable individualist. When they finally saw the light, however, their attitude miraculously changed, though the myth didn't, and the American West quietly became the first and most durable example of the modern welfare state. Oh, nuclear!
The reason that I wanted you to read this is this idea of the modern welfare state, which is just such a great line to draw. He's such a good writer. You had history class with Mr. Melbach in high school, right?
Peter Melbach?
Peter Melbach.
Of course.
Mr. Melbach would always say, whenever he brought in a book that he loved, he would be like, this guy can write out of his head.
Yeah,
out of his head.
that.
And I remember being in class being like, what does that mean? But I have said it ever since that class. And Mark Reisner can write out of his head, and that rocks. And this specifically is about the collective nature of doing these major infrastructure projects. This is particularly relevant to water because you can't have one state control its section of a river because the river starts in another state, and the things that happen in Colorado affect the water policy in California. And so that just functionally has to be done on a federal level because there's not walls between the water and between the states.
I agree with you, Nicole. We should build walls.
That is the point I was trying to make. And I think it's particularly relevant to us as we try to fight climate change because even though, ironically, this book is largely about how, these dams are fucked up. We did a bad job. This was a bad thing that we did. To do some kind of major infrastructural undertaking to make massive changes to a system as big as the climate and the ecosphere, you have to have massive federal involvement and massive, state welfare for these kinds of giant projects. And to think that we can take the private sector alone and be like, you guys fix it, it's just never going to work.
Yeah, and it's also maybe the most obvious fuck you to libertarians. It's the only reason anyone can live in the Western United States that are reservoir based is because of this massive infrastructural investment by the federal government.
Yes.
And it's your taxation is theft. It's who do you think built the reservoir where you get all of your water from, dude, in Las Vegas? So I don't know. It's just something.
And I will be clear, if you've read this book, you'll know that I think Mark Reisner has a little bit more, I wouldn't even say centrist, but he's definitely not all huge government projects are good. And there's a whole section about, remember Jimmy Carter's whole thing was balancing the budget, and a big problem with doing that was the legacy of so much spending during the New Deal, and all of these big infrastructure projects from the government were so expensive, not to mention ecologically unsound in almost every case. And clearly Mark Reisner sides with Jimmy Carter, and it's these projects were too expensive and bad. So it's not universally every large federal infrastructure program is good, but it illustrates that to address a problem at the level of climate change, you can't leave it to the individual or a private enterprise or even to the states. It's got to be at this point, a global effort, but certainly a federal effort.
Yeah, and I do remember part of this book talked about cash register dams. Are you going to talk about that?
I no, but that was one of the ones that I cut at the last minute. So if you want to talk about it, go for it.
All I remember about cash register dams is you would have this dam that would generate hydropower, which you could then sell, and then you could use that money to move numbers around in accounting to fund unprofitable water projects.
Exactly.
And so they would just build these dams and just make whatever they wanted and say it was profitable because they could shift money around, and it was just federal malfeasance. So obviously nobody's perfect is the point.
Yeah, it's the economics of these projects largely don't make sense, but a lot of them, there's a passage in the book where he's it's crazy that so many people didn't realize that water projects are political projects before they're anything else. And so once you have a big infrastructure project like a dam that's promised to have certain economic repercussions for certain people, then it's very hard to get that project to stop.
Also, once people move into a place and establish a town, it's hard for the government to be like, hey, actually, we've never really had the water for this town. And so we need to reallocate water and you can't have any water anymore. Because that's like, you just can't say that to a town.
Right.
And so
You can't say that to a town.
the town will get so offended.
Yes.
And die.
Yes.
They'll overreact and die.
One, I'm not going to read a whole thing about this, but like one point that I just want to insert here, because we're talking a lot about like cities and towns and getting water to people, is that the vast majority of these water projects are for agriculture. And a lot of it is agriculture that is certainly not the highest and best use of that water or land. And actually, he makes the point a few times that if you're just talking about the people in these places, we actually probably do have enough water, but it's not being allocated in that way. Agriculture is the problem, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I guess this book is kind of riddled with examples of humanity being like, we're going to spread out and we're going to live everywhere we want, and nature saying no to that. No, you're not. You're not going to be able to. And we have to like engineer some weird Rube Goldberg machine to make it so people can live on the fucking surface of the salt flats.
Yeah. And then sort of like with Rachel Carson and the birth of the modern environmental movement, a lot of this damming and screwing up of water systems was coming at a time when people for the first time in America were like, oh, there might be a value to nature that is not just what we can extract from it and use for humans. There might be like a value to a river that is just being left as a river, even if it's just because they're selfish and they want to go on vacation there. And so some of the first effective publicity against these big water projects was from environmental groups who were like, they're going to fuck up the Grand Canyon. Because, side note, they wanted to dam the Grand Canyon. The people at the Bureau of Reclamation kept being like, I mean, we're not going to dam the Grand Canyon National Park. We're going to dam the Grand Canyon National Monument down the road. It's obviously different. And it's like crazy that they ever thought that there was a difference. And so I'm going to have you read a passage about these shifting attitudes. Basically, at the time, if you told any American person like, hey, we're going to create a reservoir and there's going to be a lot more water for you to use, they were like, that's a great idea.
Hot dog.
And so this is kind of about the marketing campaign that like lent credence to this idea of like, maybe it's not always good to just build a reservoir.
In the meantime, David Brower was free to do what he did best, publicity. With the help of two San Francisco advertising men, Jerry Mander and Howard Gassage, the Sierra Club took out full-page advertisements attacking the dams in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Los Angeles Times. One of the Bureau's arguments for building the dams, an argument which it would later regret, was that tourists would better appreciate the beauties of the Grand Canyon from motorboats. Should we also flood the Sistine Chapel, asked one advertisement, so tourists can get nearer the ceiling? The response was thunderous. Dan Dreyfus was still with the Bureau of Reclamation then, in charge of planning projects like CAP, the Central Arizona Project. I never saw anything like it, remembers Dreyfus. Letters were arriving in dump trucks. 95% of them said we'd better keep our mitts off the Grand Canyon, and a lot of them quoted the Sierra Club ads.
Boom, got him.
Bam.
So I wanted to include this partially just because it's nice to remember a time when there was an environmental club getting a victory. we want that W. But I also think it's important to think about like advertising and media and how good fossil fuel companies are at it in the context of climate change. And I think that as slimy as it feels, it is something that the environmental movement could perhaps stand to be a little bit better at. Because when it works, it really works. And I think this idea of like convincing people that there is an inherent value to nature in its wild state is like a foundational tenet of the environmental movement that would be nice if we could focus on a little bit more, even though the discussion has maybe become much more, no pun intended, polluted since the 1950s.
Nice. For me, pun intended.
Okay.
I like that. That's a great quote. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Okay, and then finally, the last quote that I want to pick, and it was so hard for me to pick just a few passages because this whole book is a banger. I highly recommend reading it.
Except the last quarter of it, but
I thought it was fine, but I'm a better reader than Rollie is.
I mean, it's probably true.
I mean, one thing that I wish we had more time to cover, but I don't want to do it unless we can go in depth, is how they divided the water of the Colorado River and how they just assumed that there would be way more water than has ever been in the Colorado River for forever.
It was such a moment of like, our kids will deal with this.
Totally. Okay, this is the last section that I want you to read, and this is about a lot of these water projects were sustained because basically huge subsidies were given to farmers. It benefited a lot of farmers, and it wasn't even like small-time farmers, it was like big rich guy farms. And the math didn't work out even for them, and the anti-dam campaign kept going to these farmers and being like, this is worse for you, but they refused to believe it. And
I think if I was the farmer and some City Slickin' Sierra Club guy was like, look, this is going to screw you over, I'd be like, fuck you, dude.
Even worse, it was a Sierra Club City Slickin' lady.
Oh, my God, lady. You have 2 seconds to get off my property.
I think I'm going to have you read sort of a long section, and we'll cut it around later. Start from, did Arizona's farmers realize, and go down to, they had absolutely no idea.
Shit, okay.
I know.
Did Arizona's farmers realize any of this? One of William Martin and Helen Ingram's graduate students, Nancy Laney, traveled around, a lot of names here.
That is one thing about Cadillac Desert, is he mentions every person who's ever been involved in water in any capacity by name.
Nancy Laney traveled around the state to find out. To her astonishment, most of the farmers didn't. One of the farms Laney visited was the Farmers Investment Corporation, a huge pecan-growing operation south of Tucson that is about as far from the diversion point on the Colorado River as one can be.
Just for a little context, they're talking about how these farmers get water from the Colorado River, and it's largely pumped uphill towards them, which is very expensive.
Why pecans, which are native to the Mississippi Delta, should be grown on subsidized water in a desert state is another matter entirely. If it arrives, Cap water will have surmounted a lift of well water over 1,000 feet and traveled more than 300 miles to get there. Meanwhile, there is still plenty of water immediately under the farm, less than 200 feet down. Despite the huge subsidies written into Cap, as well as any reclamation project, the farmers are excused from paying interest costs. The groundwater is certain to be much cheaper, at least until the aquifer drops several hundred more feet. The worst area-wide decline in Arizona's water table has been around 200 feet, and that took decades to happen. But the farm manager at Farmers Investment expressed to Laney his unalterable belief that Cap water will be cheaper than pumping. Water is essential, he said with religious conviction, adding that he would back any plan where more water would be available. He had no idea what Cap water would cost him, but planned to sign contracts to buy it anyway. His state of knowledge, the level of blind faith, were not unusual. One farmer thought that the water was going to arrive by gravity instead of being pumped many hundreds of feet uphill. One believed that there was still enough surplus water in the Colorado River to turn the entire Grand Canyon into a reservoir, something he devoutly wished. Only 2 of the farmers Laney interviewed seemed to have a sense of things as they really were. One realized that Arizona's Colorado River water was jeopardized and thought it was high time we took Canada's surplus water to replenish it. The other said that even if it turned out he could not afford Cap water, he was going to sign a contract to buy it anyway, because contracts are made to be broken. There, in a simple phrase, was perhaps the worst legacy of the Bureau of Reclamation's 80 years as the indulgent godfather of the arid West. The irrigation farmers not only had come to expect heavily subsidized water as a kind of right, allowing them to pretend that the region's preeminent natural fact, a drastic scarcity of that substance, was an illusion. They now believed that if it turned out they couldn't afford the water, the Bureau, which is to say the nation's taxpayers, would practically give it away. These farmers were about the most conservative faction in what may be the most politically conservative of all the 50 states. They regularly sent to Congress politicians eager to demolish the social edifice built by the New Deal, to abolish welfare, school lunch programs, aid to the handicapped, funding for the arts, even to sell off some of the national parks and public lands. But their constituents had become the ultimate example of what they decried, so coddled by the government that they lived in the cocoon-like world of a child. They remained oblivious to what their Cap water would cost them, but were certain it would be offered to them at a price they could afford. The farmers had become the very embodiment of the costly, irrational welfare state they loathed, and they had absolutely no idea.
Man, this guy can write out of his head.
Man.
You babies in your cocoons.
Cocoon-like child. Love
You want to take a sip of water after that incredibly long passage that I made you read? That will.
That was Rollie reading the entire catalog.
On the first try.
Yeah. So I love this story and I love this paragraph because it is, again, this is not like small-time subsistence farmers. These are big mega farming corporations who are receiving huge subsidies on water, which is incredibly expensive and does not make sense to be pumped to where they are. And they think they're going to keep getting it cheap for forever because historically they have. And there's no evidence that they're not going to keep having access to cheap water from the Colorado River or from pumping it from the aquifer or, as that one guy thinks, stealing Canada's water in Arizona for some reason. And this is sort of emblematic of the problem with subsidies in the climate movement generally. We are incentivizing people to use resources in a bad way. And we are, while nominally existing in like a capitalist system where market forces will price things appropriately, like it should be way too expensive to grow pecans in Tucson, but we're making that artificially cheap in the same way that it should be way more expensive to drive a gas guzzling car, but we're making gas artificially cheap. So we are incentivizing the behavior that we don't want to see. And the people who benefit from it is, I think it's in it might even be in both of the books that I'm reading, but it's that Upton Sinclair quote that's like, it's very difficult to get a man to understand something which his salary depends on him not understanding.
Yeah.
And it is crazy that just the entire distribution of water in the Western United States is like not based on any kind of sound financial principle at all. It's all wishful thinking still.
It's sort of a microcosm of, I guess, the federal government in general. Like, it's just this sort of like weird Gordian knot of regulations and subsidies, and like everyone agrees that we're wasting a ton of money and no one can agree like what specifically we're wasting it on.
Yes, totally. And that is like so much of what this book is about, is that everybody agrees that we're doing this wrong, but nobody wants to be the person who changes. Yeah. Nobody wants to be the person who changes the system. And in fact, the system is propped up on such like a specific house of cards that if you change even one thing, everything else becomes a disaster. So it is kind of this intractable problem that we have to work as a country to remediate.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree on the solution. Take it from Canada.
And Canada loves that solution.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is Cadillac Desert. There's so much more to this book. It's such a rich text. I highly recommend reading it. But we don't have time to talk about the rest of it today because Rollie has another book to tell me about.
Hot dog.
Okay, Nicole, the next book I want to... You know what? I shouldn't talk about this because you've already read this because I gave you this book 2 years ago. It's called Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson.
You and I both know that you did give me this book for Christmas 2 years ago.
And so obviously you read it
and
at
I
some point in the
still haven't
past
read it.
700 plus days. Oh, no.
But I'm going to read it. I swear to God, I'm going to read it.
Okay.
You gave me this book. I got over 10 books that Christmas.
Okay.
And I'm just still working my way through.
5 books a year. Yeah, okay. That
One
makes
of them
sense.
is the Gorman Gast novels or chronicles.
Whoa,
or
the
something.
Gooblegop novel? You got to take your time on that thing. You only get one first read of the Gooblegop novels. Wait, what is that for real?
It's some sort of fantasy book. I don't know. Nathan got
Wait,
it
you
for
haven't
me,
read that
and
either?
No, it's 900 pages.
Well, then you were using that as an excuse for why you haven't read the Ministry for the Future.
I'm going to read Ministry for the Future eventually.
Okay, well, actually don't read it, Nicole, because by the time you get around to reading Ministry for the Future, it'll be Ministry for the Present.
Oof.
You burnt. You burnt so bad. Okay, Ministry for the Future is by a guy named Kim Stanley Robinson. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool, and I think it's the only book in the lineup of these books today that will require like a spoiler alert and that I won't give it away.
Because it's a novel.
That's right. And it's a novel, the genre of which is sometimes called cli-fi or
that's
climate
fun.
fiction, which is fun.
Yeah.
If you're into that kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to talk about how the novel starts, then I'm going to talk about some key points, but I'm not going to give the whole thing away.
Good, because I famously haven't read it yet.
Yeah, well, maybe this will wet your whistle. The opening chapter is this cool story. It's set in Uttar Pradesh, India, which is one of the states of India, where the wet bulb temperature gets up to 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Oof. So wet bulb temperature is the temperature that a thermometer that's been wrapped in a wet rag reaches, so it accounts for both the temperature and humidity. So it's like, how much can you cool yourself off? Because it could be 110 degrees, 120 degrees, but if you sweat and the sweat evaporates, you can cool your skin off. But a wet bulb temperature of 108 degrees means that's about how low you can cool your body heat off to.
And that is not cool enough.
That's not cool enough, and it's so not cool enough that 20 million people die in a heat wave episode in India.
Yikes. In real life or in the fictional world of this book?
What do you think, Nicole?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I think you would have heard it if 20 million people in India died, but sorry.
I don't know.
This is the fictional part of
Okay.
a fictional future where 20 million people die.
I was sort of not listening when you said the number. So
Gotcha.
now that I'm paying more attention to the number, that does seem like
if
an
more
awful
than
lot.
3 consecutive holocausts happened in the span of 1 week, it would have come across your desk as a Daily Show writer.
Yeah.
I suspect.
And let me tell you, it would have been a laugh a minute
Yeah.
when we wrote about that.
So 20 million people die in this horrible fictional heat wave that is somewhat based in reality, because this is what might actually, like, we're hitting a runaway greenhouse effect climate that could produce this kind of heat wave in India.
I just, as a white lady, I have to say this, but 108-degree wet bulb temperature is hotter than a hot yoga class. And you only do those for like an hour. 90 minutes if you pay the surcharge.
I think you're right that you did have to say that as a white lady. But yes, so the sort of inciting incident of the novel is that there's this massive environmental disaster that kills 20 million people, and it like freaks the whole world out. And that's the end of the preview. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear the whole episode, head on over to our Patreon page where we got the whole thing ad-free. Now, do not worry. We got a bunch of episodes right here for free, but if you want to support the show and hear us cracking wise about other people's mamas, the Patreon page is the place to do it. I hope to see you there, but obviously, you know, you do you. Bye.